Just waiting for YouTube for 1 sec.
Is Amy on? Oh, there she is.
She is. We just got all the board members on, so get us on YouTube. Just wait. All right, you are good.
All right. Well, let's see. Well, good evening, everybody. We are reconvening to opening session. The meeting was reconvened to opening session at 7:05 p.m. There is no action taken during closed session to report out. Next up on the agenda is our flag salute. Paul, do you want to lead us?
Yes, happy to. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Paul, or Mr. Kagoo. Sorry about that. The next agenda item is community input for agendized items. The public may comment on items listed on the agenda, including the consent calendar, discussion, and action items. Is there any community input for agenda items, Amy?
There was not last time I checked. Let me just make one more. Nope, there is not.
Okay, moving on to the next item. Items for consent. Approve minutes from the regular meeting of the Oxford Preparatory Academy Board of Directors on June 10th, 2021. May I please receive a motion? Oh, sorry, there's a couple more. I'm sorry. The next one is personnel reports. There was a few separations, resignations, and releases. There was a return from leave of absence. It is recommended that the Board of Directors approve consent items A and B. May I receive a motion?
I make a motion to approve consent items A and B.
Thank you. Second?
A second.
Awesome. Can we start with a roll call? Agrawal, I'm going to butcher your name. So sorry.
Aye.
Kagoo?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. The next agenda item is Executive Director Report.
All right. Well, thank you guys all for joining us after our summer break has started, and we had a really amazing end to the school year with our promotion ceremonies at each one of our sites. We thank you to Miss Agarwal and Mr. Kagoo for joining us at those promotion ceremonies. It was outside and it was a little warm, but it was beautiful and nice and sunny. And the speeches that were given by the students were absolutely amazing. They did such a wonderful job, and we're just excited for to see how they all do when they go off to their various high schools. We gave an 8th grade exit survey, and so we have information about which high schools all of our students are attending, kind of how they feel about going off to high school, how prepared they feel, any advice that they would give to our upcoming middle school students. So we'll be sharing some of that information out in the future as well. We also today, our extended school year program for our Scholar Academy students started. And on Monday, our Full Steam Ahead summer program is starting with over 300 students. So it is going to be, we're going to have a lot of students that are going to benefit from that program. And we're working in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club so that students are receiving not only that math and ELA support, but also some really fun outdoor activities and STEAM activities to really get them engaged in the program. So that program will go from Monday all the way through until July 22nd. We are also continuing to enroll new students. We had a very large wait list from each one of our schools. And so our office staff at each site have been working really hard to get students enrolled and fill all of our open spaces. And we're also enrolling students for our virtual learning program for next year. We had a large wait list for virtual learning as well. And so we really want to promote our virtual learning program because we think that there are a lot of families out there who still might not be comfortable sending their kids back to school next year. And our program has been a real success for virtual learning. Instead of it just being a homeschool program where students are just doing computer programs or working on packets, our students are being taught by OPA teachers, having synchronous class lessons. They're having, extra world language, and they can participate in our after-school enrichment program. So it really is a much more robust program. And so we're really looking to continue enrolling students and promoting that program as well. But really right now we're planning for the upcoming school year and kind of in full gear with all of our administrators to get ready to make next year a huge success and kind of kick off being able to bring everybody back on campus from the first day of school for a full day of instruction, and really bring back all of those things that everybody has missed so much about what makes OPA great, and really go into the next school year super strong and just providing amazing experiences for our students. So we're just looking forward to 21-22.
Thank you, Ms. Kernan, or Dr. Kernan. Next, we have our director's reports. So let's start with Ms. Agarwal. I'm going to butcher your name so many times. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I actually have no comments.
All right, Mr. Kagu.
Hi, thank you again for inviting us to the promotion ceremony. Both campuses did a fantastic job. I mean, it was hot, but you guys gave us some shade, so I appreciate that. I very much appreciate it. I wore a suit after a long time with a tie, which was, again, probably not such a good idea, but I enjoyed it. But I think that the one thing I want to point out to my fellow board members is when as a organization, we said, it's okay if we only have to come back for 7 weeks, but let's come back for 7 weeks. I think I cannot emphasize how right that decision was. I mean, every single person who gave a speech, every single 8th grader who gave a speech said they talked about the fact that they were able to at least spend part of their time with each other in person, right? And for the year that we had, I feel very, very happy about how positively we ended. So I really appreciate the staff kind of pulling together and saying, yeah, look, I know it's going to be a hassle for us to just come back full time for a short period of time, but we're going to do it. And you guys did an admirable job. And again, the promotion ceremonies were awesome. I mean, the first time I'm going to a 8th grade graduation. I've never been to one, and it was really good. So I'm glad I was able to go. Which sort of leads me to a quick update on strategic planning. Some of the board members and some of your staff, you guys saw this. There's an email that went out. We continue to hear this, hey, we want the old OPA, we want the good elements of the old OPA. And, if I speak to every single person I speak to, they have their own sort of interpretation of what they really like that needs to come back. And as time progresses, you're going to have parents graduate out with their kids. And then we potentially might lose some of that magic that, we could continue on, particularly after a tough year like this, the COVID year. So, Dr. Kernan and I, we've been talking about that, and then, Ms. Agarwal and Ms. Travis, both of them, we feel positive. We feel that we should go get some of this information, capture some of that tribal knowledge, and put that down. So, Dr. Kernan ran a query of the parents who've been here for a long period of time. We sent out an email today with a survey request saying, please, can you please offer up some time for us to have a focus group? And those, I don't know if we've had responses, but we are excited about it. Hopefully, each of you who know OPA parents, whether their kids are still at OPA or have graduated, please twist their arms to participate in this. We'd love to have that. The idea is to have like an SOC type of focus group and an SV focus group, because both of them are at different stages of their life. They started differently, and so it might be nice to have both those views as well. And then our hope is that we go in as, oh, tell us about the student experience, tell us about the parent experience. Kind of focus group, we chunk it out into smaller groups to say, okay, not today, but this session, let's focus on this portion of the student life cycle classroom or lunch areas. And I saw a lot of cool things in the board policy. Dr. Kannan, I do read the board policies, even though I complained about it last time. But I think I'm excited about it. We're hoping to do that sometime in July. Our intent is that, aspirationally, we would love to get a good feel for, strengthening the core by the end of summer. That's kind of aspirationally what we're looking for. So fingers crossed that we get there. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kagu. And next is Dr. Smith.
Thank you. Let's see. Dr. Kernan, am I going to share my screen or?
You can, I made you a co-host, so you can share your screen if you'd like.
I will do that. So I'm happy to give a very brief report out from the Academic Outcomes Committee. We have a plan. And so I'm excited to share the hard work that's been put in thus far to coming up with where we're going to go to next. So I will look at pulling that up. And this will be very brief. I just have like 4 or 5 slides here. So we thought it'd be really important, as we wanted to just kind of jump into the work, but thinking it's probably important that we all ground ourselves around language, because all of us coming with our different perspectives, when we use the term graduate profile, might have some variety of expectations. So wanted to start out with looking at what we mean when we say graduate profile, and this is pulling from best practices. Really, it is just that visual representation of the skills and the habits of mind that we believe define learning experiences at OPA.
Genetics, or whether it's just down to conditioning and environment, but this is the nature.
Sorry about that. Just muted.
No worries. I didn't know something on my. I was like, I'm not sure.
That was somebody who jumped into the meeting and wasn't muted.
No worries. So building off that, it's aspirational, memorable, and it's really our outward commitment to look at what we mean when we say student success. And it's not relying solely on just grades and test scores and credits earned or classes completed as evidence of learning, but looking at students more holistically. And then it's also a commitment to redesign OPA as needed in the ways that really ensure that all students can succeed in fulfilling that specific graduate profile and our vision for learning and success. I just wanted to share this quote because I really liked it. And I think it really brings the level of importance to a graduate profile. And it is becoming our true north as an organization. It's different from mission or vision. As it says, a graduate profile is a document that a school or district uses to specify the cognitive, personal, and interpersonal competencies that students should have when they graduate. Co-created with input from key stakeholders, this profile is a clear visualization of priority goals for teaching and learning that can be easily communicated to students, parents, faculty, and staff to align their collective efforts. So this will become so useful on so many levels, as we do use it as our true north, and we can use it as, marketing what OPA is all about and why families want to choose to send their students here. And then use it to share evidence of our outcomes in the areas that are important to us. So there's different ways you can put together a graduate profile, but these are the most common elements you see in examples out there. So there's the student outcome categories, and those are the characteristics that we think all students should have success in when they leave OPA. And then there's our specific definitions that we will come up with as an organization, and what we mean when we list a characteristic. And then there's our performance criteria and the performance indicators and the performance evidence. And it's important to define those up front, because how are we going to know that we're being successful and helping students reach these characteristics? And then there's the standards alignment mapping. And this is helping to show that everything we're doing is in alignment with, guidance from the state and other places where we have to, meet certain criteria. So it's important that we're mapping and being considerate of all those external influences that we need to, consider. So next and last slide. This is our proposed process. Kind of a timeline between now and December. So unfortunately, based on how you want to look at it, we're kind of kicking off right before summer. So we do think it's important that we first identify and gather data from internal and external stakeholders and publish research and best practices. So this includes looking at all the things like that's coming out of the focus groups, all that internal stakeholder knowledge that is so important, as well as looking at what are externally best practices and things that we should use to influence our decisions around what the graduate profile should be. So we're thinking the first, couple months into this, we want to collect all of that, and then we'll spend July and August trying to review it all and synthesize. So when folks come back to work in August, we're ready to have a full committee meeting again and start drafting a profile, looking at those elements of the categories and the definitions. Then after that, the next September through October-ish, it's gathering stakeholder feedback on that draft. Again, and as I was said in the quote earlier, stakeholder feedback and input in this process is super important. So we've made sure it's infused throughout. And after that, we have revised the draft after we get the feedback as needed. And then we'll do that mapping once we have what the profile is going to be to the standards that I mentioned. And then we'll identify the performance indicators and performance evidence. Some will be obvious ways of measuring outcomes, and others, we might have to be more strategic or thoughtful around, especially if we don't have those measurements already in place. And that will trigger possibly a lot of change in practice and assessment, depending on what we define as being needed in this area. And then finally, after all that, we hope to submit to the board for a full approval of the graduate profile in December. So I hope this shows just again, this is a comprehensive and thoughtful process. It's not just coming up with a list of, hey, this is all the things we think students need to have. It really is meaningful, and we know is going to make such a difference, hopefully in their lives moving forward. So that's why we want to be thoughtful and not just shove it through and, do it I still think this is rather quick. But I know it might seem a little like long for some, but again, thinking about these steps and what it really means, I think this is very reasonable. So that's my report from the work of that committee. And I don't know if member Agarwal wants to share anything else. She's my co-member in crime with the group.
No, I think you hit on everything, and being thoughtful in this process, which I think we really need to address, and I appreciate that. So I think you hit it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. I'm excited to see the outcomes of both what happens from the strategic planning as well as the academic outcomes. It should be exciting to see the next level of where the committee work goes. I really have nothing to report for my own director's report, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is items for presentation. The first one is fiscal service report.
Great, I'll share my screen. Okay, so today we're looking at the May financials. These are the final financials that we present to the board prior to getting the unaudited numbers for this past school year, which is typically in the August timeframe. So overall, things are looking pretty good for both schools. We're staying kind of within our forecast. So for SOC, we're seeing operating income still projected at about 1.1 million at the end of this school year. There was a little reshuffling between expenses and revenues between the last forecast and this forecast. So just going left to right, there was some savings in books and supplies, about 14,000 that we're estimating at this point in the year, not seeing as many expenses come in as budgeted. Local revenue, $6,000 in additional revenue. Most of that is related to the CARES Act credits that you're receiving. So that's the bulk of that revenue. And then the compensation and benefits, about $20,000 increase in cost, and that's related to some of the final payouts due to some of the staff turnover. And so that was approved at previous board meetings. And so overall, it kind of washed out with each other. So just reshuffling of the budget, still staying within forecast. For SV, we're actually seeing an improvement in the year-end operating income, about 784,000 compared to the 773,000 previously presented. The 6,000 again is the same local revenue, mostly related to the credits and from the CARES Act. And then the comp and benefits here, we're actually seeing savings, as there were savings at this point in the year related to some of the staff leave of absences throughout the year. So we had left kind of placeholder for costs there, and at this point in the year have gone ahead and recognized the savings, which offset some of the increased costs that we saw with turnover. The May and check credit card register, we only flagged one expense. Overall, things are staying kind of within budget or within kind of what we would expect. And so we just flagged this one check on the register as the travel and conference budget. We had reduced that kind of training costs at the start of the year, and we had this one other additional check come in that was exceeded what we had budgeted, but again, we were able to kind of reshuffle some of the budgets in different expense areas to cover these costs. The last few slides I have are on next year's budget. So it is up for approval today for the 21-22 budget. So for SOC, what we have up for approval is the numbers in the current budget draft. So the operating income is projected at about 695,000 for next year. This is a solid operating income. We're seeing fund balance grow to about 4.6 million, about 57% of expenses. Since we last presented the budget at the public hearing, we have added some additional items. And so in the variance column, it indicates the changes that have been made. The other state revenues is related to your state special ed revenue, as we've seen an increase in the amount per ADA that you would be receiving from that funding source. So we've adjusted for that. On the expense side, compensation and benefits are about $44,000 higher due to adding an additional speech and language pathologist position. For books and supplies, later in the agenda, there's a few items up for $1 increase in services and operating, primarily through legal and rent costs.
I'm sorry, I think you cut out there. Can you go through the expenses again of what the variances are?
Sure, yeah, sorry about that. Can you hear me okay right now?
Yeah, you can start just with the compensation and benefits. That's kind of where you started, or where you cut out.
Okay. Okay, so for the compensation and benefits, we're seeing an increase of 44,000 related to the speech and language pathologist. We've added one, so we originally had one budgeted, and we've now have two budgeted for books or between the two schools. And then books and supplies, it's $30,000 increase. It's related to increased costs that they are later on the agenda as approval items that we've incorporated into the budget for next year. And then for services and other operating expenses, $87,000 increase in cost. And that's primarily driven through adding additional legal and rent costs compared to what we previously presented.
Sorry, real quick. Yeah, thank you for pausing. Did these include the anticipated, if it's approved tonight, the lease for the new building?
Yes, that was added into the services and other operating income.
That's in there? Okay, thank you.
Ms. Parikh, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Kuku.
Am I reading this correctly that this year our operating income was about 1.1 million for SOC, and next year it's going to be 843,000? Is that right? Am I comparing the right two numbers?
So for next year, it would be the 695 is what's up for approval.
Sorry, that's even, yeah. So is that right? Am I reading it correctly? So how much of that is because we next year won't get COVID funding, and how much of that is just flat out reduction in operating income? Do you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's actually, we have COVID funding both in this year's budget or in forecast and in next year's forecast. The key kind of driver is as we're shifting to in-person education, we have additional staffing that's been brought back in terms of, or not brought back, but added kind of to the model compared to what we had this past year. So that's kind of a big driver of it.
Yeah, it's mostly cost related to in-person instruction. So bringing back the world language teachers and our STEAM lab teachers, also some of campus supervisors, positions that we weren't actually needing to fund when we were virtual.
Yeah, I think I would love to get a sense as we approve the budget, how comfortable we are, because I guess we're used to seeing bigger numbers in terms of operating income, which I think about that as cushion in case we get hit somewhere or something goes wrong, enrollment goes down, funding gets deferred, whatnot. And I don't know if, having seen only like seven-figure numbers for SOC, I don't know what to make out of this 400,000 reduction from last year. Does that still keep us comfortable with that, with whatever cushion we need and whatever risk we should anticipate? I would love to, I don't know if it's here or on a separate discussion, but I would love to get a feel from staff on that.
Yeah, we actually have a much higher operating income than most other schools do. Usually, like our ending fund balance as a percent of our expenses is at about 56%. A comfortable position would be between 20 and 25%. So we have a very large operating income as well as a large ending fund balance compared to what would be a reasonable cushion for a similar schools of our size. And I think Amita can probably speak about other schools that she works with. We're pretty high and comfortable.
Yeah, I would just echo that. Yeah, a lot of the this past year has been kind of unusual in terms of a lot of one-time funding that we haven't seen in the past. But for the most part, your operating income is, we typically see like $100,000, $200,000 operating incomes for a lot of the schools that we work with, and fund balances. I work with schools that have as low as 5%, 10%. So your fund balance is definitely a good spot. And typically I look at the fund balance as kind of the place where if we're looking for long-term stability or kind of uncertainty, that's we want to make sure that that's healthy and you have a healthy fund balance, so that if some large expense came up, or if some, if deferrals, things like that, like we know we have that kind of that fund balance in place outside of even just the money that we have for operating income for the next year.
And Mr. Rick, how much of that 4.6 million do you don't have to answer it now, just point me in the right direction of how much of that is cash versus how much of that is like depreciation, which is funny money anyway, right? So how much of that would be cash? Do you have a sense of it?
Yeah, so we actually included in the exhibits, and I have the PowerPoint open, but in the exhibits, the cash flow statements for the multi-year. I don't want to say the wrong number, but I believe it was around. I want to say it was around 3 million plus would be the cash balance.
3.2 million in cash that we have. So most of it is actually cash on hand.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Sorry, Ms. Travis.
No worries. I had 2 questions as well. First off, I know you said that you mentioned that in other operating is going to be including the rent. Is it also including all the soft cost associated with the rent? Phone, internet, all that good stuff as well?
Yeah, so we've budgeted in for, as far as utilities and things like that. David or Mr. Barley is still working on finalizing the numbers for the phones, but we did put in a little bit of a cushion to make sure that we were able to cover the phones and internet and any other costs associated with that move.
Okay. And then my other question is I know we've been approving a lot of curriculum in the last several meetings. At this point, do you have all your curriculum needs for next year? And are they all factored now into this budget?
So yeah, all of the curriculum now is factored into the budget. And actually we've factored in some cushion as far as if we were to increase our IS program as well into the budget. So you're approving the actual amount that we're spending, but in the budget, we factored in a little bit of a cushion just in case we see some increases in enrollment.
And is that also go for like the technology needs and things like that as well? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so then I'll, just for SV, it's the same changes. So both sites had the same changes, just in different scale. So overall, compared to what we presented at the last meeting, for SV, we're projecting a $441,000 operating income, and it is that is down $151,000 from the budget draft we presented at the last board meeting, with the same changes. And then the fund balance is as well pretty strong at SV, so we have 3.7 million in terms of the fund balance. So overall, looking really stable and strong. The last slide I included just to give you perspective of kind of how the year kind of usually flows. So typically at this point, we would have kind of an approved budget from the state with kind of final numbers. The budget from the state has not been approved yet. They're still negotiating a lot of the items. And so we've gone with our conservative estimates based on the state budget. But as the state budget gets finalized, when we could see changes over the summer, we'll be updating you with additional forecast updates in terms of if the revenue, if there's additional one-time funding or if there's changes to kind of the COLA or anything like that, we would update the projections accordingly. If the changes are material or if there's a lot that changes before the start of the school year, the board could reapprove a budget. Typically, you see a new forecast every month, and so it's only if it's really material that we would see that. And then just to put on your radar, for you're approving the 21-22 budget right now. But we do, by Ed Code, have to basically provide updated projections to your authorizer and the state through the first interim and the second interim budgets, both in November and February and March. And so at a minimum, you would be seeing kind of updated, what does it actually look like for this current year at those timeframes. And so it's kind of just to put on your radar that you're approving a budget, but it will continue to fluctuate and change as we see updates from the state or as, as your program needs change through the year. And you'll see these reports, the interim reports, come to you for approval as well later in the year. So just something to have on your radar for timeline. And then that was all I had, unless there was any additional questions. I know I didn't pause for the May financials, so if there's any questions there, we can go back to that as well.
I have a broader thought about policy around this. Because if I looked at the board policy correctly, it looks like it's previously been set like a 3% unrestricted reserve, and that the ending fund balance at each school needed to be at 15%. So if you look at this and we're at 55, back to what was said earlier, this is a lot higher. But I'm wondering, does the board want to maybe talk about this at a future board meeting, if we like that 15% and want to leave it, or if we'd like to raise it a bit? Just proposing that as maybe a future agenda item.
I think that's a great suggestion, Dr. Smith, in looking at what we should really factor on for the budget in the future. So,
yeah, I think the counterpoint is, should we spend more on, if we have money, right? That's another, maybe that's also what you're saying, Dr. Smith, because if really a policy is 15%, I would love to know how we came up with that policy, and then come up with what we think is appropriate from a fiscal perspective, as you said, and then see if there's money to be spent on students for additional programs or whatnot, right? So yeah, I love it. Especially because I was told we can use this to fund future growth in other campuses. So I did not realize that. I thought we were one organization, but I didn't realize that. So.
We can. It depends on how we're spending it, and on which students and what type of growth. But yeah, we can definitely, that might be better, having possibly like a financial workshop or something where we can kind of look at our reserves, and even as part of the strategic planning committee, kind of looking at the state minimum is a 3%. For public schools. So again, we're much higher. We also don't have the luxury of most school districts of sort of having the same ability to borrow. So hence ours is much higher than that normal 3%. But we are, again, as was discussed earlier, kind of much higher on top of that. So I think as part of our strategic planning discussions, I think that will be part of those discussions of kind of looking at strengthening our core with some of that money, or possible ways that we can expand programs for our current students, or looking at other forms of expansion.
Also, I'd love to see some best practices, like some criteria around what the best schools do and how much they have in reserves and et cetera. So if we could have that data before we go into the workshop, that'd be great as well.
And also on that same point with deferrals, how much is usually a comfortable level for, percentage for deferrals? Because I think that's one of the reasons that we keep it so high, is in case that ever happens. But that would also be helpful to know, how much you'll need for that also. Awesome. Well, thank you. The next item for presentation is the California School Dashboard Local Indicators Report, and Dr. Henry will be presenting this.
I will. Let me share my screen. Let's see. I don't think I'm sharing my screen.
Not yet. Nope.
Not yet. Okay. Hold on just a second. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Okay, let me put this in present mode. Well, thank you for letting me report to you again. My report today, this is still loading, is a little background on the California School Dashboard, but really the mandatory piece that we needed to present tonight was specifically with our local indicators. So to give you a little background, well, here's the purpose of the presentation. I'll start there. Again, a brief introduction to the California School Dashboard. I heard Mr. Kagu bring up the California School Dashboard during our strategic planning meeting, and I thought maybe this would be a good time just to give a little bit of background before we dive into the local indicators, because they are related. Also, to share our reflective process of how what reflective process we use to look at our practices as it relates to local indicators to meet this criteria. And then also the purpose of the presentation is really to meet CDE's required reporting of the local indicators each year. It is a requirement that we do this. So to tell you a little bit about our California accountability system, a few years ago, instead of using one number like an API, or we also used an acronym of AYP to measure our performance as schools, as an organization, California Department of Education State Board spent many years trying to find an accountability system that would share performance data with the public, be more than just one number, look at our students, our schools, our performance with different facets, measure continuous improvement so that it's not just about how you're doing right now, but are you growing? Are you doing better than you did before? This accountability system also focuses on equity and looks at all of our student groups so that it's not just about overall performance, but we are really taking a microscope in a way and making sure all of our students are performing. And then also, how do we connect that? They tried to take this new accountability system, connect it to the LCAP so that they aren't standalones, and also align those to the 8 state priorities. And if you remember when we presented the LCAP to you, we talked about those 8 state priorities of basic services, parent involvement, pupil achievement, other pupil outcomes, pupil engagement, the implementation of state standards, school climate, and course access. So this is kind of a flow chart to show you how this all works. The dashboard, the California School Dashboard, is a way that presents data and identifies our school's strengths and areas of need. We also then use local data. So we used surveys, we use some of our local assessments, things like that, other input. And then all of that feeds into the LCAP, and which includes our local indicators, which we will see tonight. And the overall goal of all of this is that we improve student outcomes and we do what's best for our students. So here are a few basics about the dashboard. So the dashboard is a website. I put the link there. You go into the website and you can type in any school, any organization. It's public. The dashboard, again, is really focused around equity. It will break everything down by student groups. So we're looking at our homeless population, foster youth, students with disability, English learners, also by ethnicities. So every measure is broken down to make sure that every student group is able to not only show progress, but growth over time. And so I wrote there growth and status and change. And those terms are going to be important when I tell you what's happening with the dashboard now, because there are some changes due to COVID. But the way they look at growth is every year with these measures, they say, where is OPA SOC or OPA SB performing now? That is your status. And then they also look at, well, how did that change from last year? Was there improvement? Did they maintain? Or did they decline? And I will tell you, studying the dashboard for so many years, that the way the data is reported really puts more emphasis on the growth than where you are. So even if we have some high performing schools, and so But that way, schools that maybe aren't as high performing as ours, as long as they're showing growth and continuous improvement, they also have the ability to show success on the dashboard. And then also the dashboard is reported in colors. So a blue, if you have a blue or a green, that's very high performing. Yellow is kind of where you're maintaining. And then anywhere that we are orange or red, even if it's for a small student group, that would need to be addressed in the LCAP and then also through our local indicator. So that's your dashboard 101. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'll go through a few more updates. So every year, except last year, and I'll talk about that a little bit, the dashboard is updated every December. It's called a fall dashboard. I don't know why they call it fall when it's December. Maybe it should be a winter dashboard, but every December there is an updated dashboard. And the dashboard looks at these state measures. The two in the middle are for high school, so that does not apply to us. That would be graduation rate and college and career readiness for high school students. But the ones on the outside, we report on the dashboard for our students through 8th grade. So academic performance is based on state assessments. Chronic absenteeism is based on the number of students who exceed 10% absenteeism in a year. And that's excused absences or not. And that's a change. California used to report truancies, but now we're looking at, even if it's an excused absent, is a student missing more than 10% of the school year? Because we know that missing time adds up and students can really fall behind. Suspension rate is looked at, as well as the progress of our English learners. So those are your normal state measures. But if you notice when I talked about the priorities, the 8 priorities, they're not all measured through these 6 state measures. For example, parent engagement is not being involved here, basic services, course access. So what California did is they added 5 local indicators that we need to reflect upon every year, use local data, and report out at a board meeting. So those 5 local indicators are basic conditions, parent engagement, access to a broad course of study, the implementation of state standards, and school climate. So those will be the areas that I will be presenting on tonight. And those align to the priorities that aren't measured by the state indicators. But here's some important updates about the dashboard due to COVID. So the last real complete dashboard that we have is fall 2019. In 2020, because summative assessments were not given, attendance, suspension, and other data was not consistent in 2020 because of school closure. So a very limited dashboard was released. There really is no data. It was just demographics and your site addresses. Coming up for this year in fall 2021, because there was no data reported last year, there will be no colors reflected, because remember, you need status, where are you now, and change over time, and we won't have that change from 2020. So there will be no colors. And in fact, I did get word that they may not even publish a fall 2021 dashboard. So that's still questionable, but even if they do, it'll be very limited data, because there will be no academic indicator, because as you know, the state allowed flexibility with state assessments this year. And so they really don't have that to report on the dashboard. We will, however, locally report our assessment data by student group and meet the standards that way. So back to the local indicators, which is what we're presenting tonight. So each year, schools, districts are required to use state templates. So there's guidance given, and there's a certain standard that we need to meet in each of these 5 areas, and we do need to report them at a board meeting. But the process really requires that we reflect through a variety of tools. And I do want to be transparent with something. When we are reflecting, if our reflections are positive or negative, that does not matter when it comes to compliance for this. Just going through the process of reflection, we will have met the standard for the local indicators. Their hope is that you grow from what you learn, but they're not really judging you based on what we find. So let's look at our local indicators. The first one is basic services. That is aligned to state priority area 1, which is appropriately assigned teachers, access to curriculum, materials. I also showed you what goals it aligns on the LCAT. I wanted to kind of show cohesion between all of these things. And then the standard that we have to meet in this area is we have to measure our progress as it relates to the Williams settlement, and that 100% of our school sites address any complaints, deficiencies. We have fully credentialed teachers and materials for all students. So after reflection, for basic services, we have met that standard, and we found that there were 0 misassignments for our English learners or misassignments in general for our staff. We had 0% of our students without access to materials, and then also 0 instances where our facilities did not meet good repair. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me at any time. I'll give a little pause in between each. So the second local indicator is the implementation of state standards. And this one's a little bit more lengthy of a tool. It is tied to state priority number 2, which is the implementation of state academic standards. It's aligned to our LCAT goal number 1. And the standard that we have to meet is that we annually measure our progress in implementing the state standards, providing professional learning for our teachers, that we have an adopted curriculum, and that we are using the state frameworks and Common Core state standards. So here are the different areas, and this is the actual tool that usually is uploaded into the dashboard and becomes public facing every December. So if we are going to have a dashboard, which as I said, I contacted OCDE, Orange County Department of Education, and they're not quite sure, but either way, we're still meeting California Department of Ed's guidelines that we need to do this. So the first part is to rate our progress in providing professional learning for teaching as it relates to the standards. So we went through this with our teams. Dr. Kernan and I reviewed looking at where we are. And we found that we have increased. Now, if you recall, we did not have to do this in 2020. So the increase was from 2 years ago, which was 2019. And you can see the scale above. So if we had a 1, it would mean we're not providing professional learning, we're exploring doing that. A 2 would mean we're beginning to develop some professional learning around curriculum and standards. A 3 is we're initially implementing. 4 is full implementation, and a 5 is full implementation and sustainability of professional learning. So you can see that we rated ourselves in our reflective process as a 5, meaning full implementation and sustainability for English language arts as well as math. And then history, social science was a little less because we are initially implementing the new curriculum and we have some trainings planned for that. And then our ELD standards as well as our science standards showed a gain, but they are also at full implementation. For the next part, we have to look at our progress. Our progress in making instructional materials that are aligned to the adopted standards and curriculum frameworks available to all of our teachers. And you can see the same ratings schedule for the different topics. Really, history, social science, as you know, we're adopting a new curriculum. So we're initially rolling that out. We're a little further with the other subjects. Then we also have to look at policies and if we're meeting with our staff and getting their input, which we did through the staff LCAP survey, in identifying areas where they think they can improve in delivering instruction, learning about the frameworks. And so really getting their input into our professional learning plan to help better serve them. And we put ourselves as full implementation on that point. We really are getting feedback through the staff LCAP survey. I would say also through the PLC meetings, having conversations, site leadership team. And again, history is still in the beginning phases. The fourth area for the implementation of state standards is really some specialty standards, I will call them, and how we implemented them. So we found in our reflection that for career technical education, that's geared a little more towards high school. Even middle schools are generally just exploring career technical education standards. So this is not an atypical rating for K through 8, but that we're in the exploration and research phase of how to bring in career technical education standards. And we're a little further in the other areas. And we've seen a lot of growth, in fact, in these areas from where we were 2 years ago. Our world languages are now all using state adopted standards, visual and performing arts. We're still growing a little bit, but we are in the initial implementation of that, as well as our physical education and health education standards. And then finally, we had to rate the LEA success at engaging in the following activities with our teachers. So the first one is identifying professional learning needs of our teachers as a whole, identifying the professional learning needs of individual teachers, and then also providing support for the standards if they are not mastered. So we feel that we've done a good job at getting the input of our teachers, our chancellors, our site leadership teams. And I, just in my short time here, have found that teachers are very willing to let you know what they need in some of the conversations that I've had already. So our next local indicator is
Dr. Henry, may I interrupt?
Of course.
Can you go 2 pages back? I really like the way you guys rated. I think it seems quite fair. I do have a question. I mean, visual and performing arts, I know you guys are initial implementation, but if you go back to the theory of multiple intelligence, something like that becomes particularly important. So I think I'm glad you guys are on a pathway, but that's, I think everything else seemed to be appropriate, you know, like social studies. Yeah, we're implementing a new curriculum, but this one would be something, let's try to figure out how to invest in it. I really like the way you guys rated yourself. Like nothing felt like out of place, so to speak. So thank you for that. But this one, multiple intelligence, particularly because we say this might be interesting.
Yes.
Yes. I think that's, and I'll kind of just jump in also on that. I think we kind of rated ourselves, if we were a normal school that wasn't really focused in this area, then we could probably say that we were a 5. But because it is a big focus of our program at OPA, I think we kind of have a little bit higher standards when it comes to that. And so since it is a big focus area that we're going to be looking at for next year, we decided to kind of put ourselves kind of at that initial implementation of really where we want to be. And especially with COVID and the fact that we couldn't do a lot of those things for the last 2 years, so that we could kind of use that as a springboard. I know Stephanie and I actually talked a lot about that one specific one, and kind of using that as a springboard to be able to really use that as a focus area for next year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Mr. Kagu. So if there aren't any other questions, I'll move to parent engagement. So for parent engagement, that is aligned to our LCAP goal number 4. And the standard that we need to meet each year is that we need to measure our parent engagement in 2 areas. So one is seeking input from parents in decision-making. And then number 2 is promoting parental participation in programs. And I will admit this one was a little more difficult because of last year. Some of the participation we weren't able to have in person, but we did things virtually. So we tried again to make an honest assessment. We went through I read every comment of the parent LCAP survey that was given before to help drive this, as well as looking at the data and also comments and things that we have heard. So to start, before I get into the indicator, I'm doing it a little differently on this one. I did want to share just this screen of the LCAT parent survey results. We had 552 responses, and overall did quite well in certain areas. These are the areas that specifically tie to that local indicator in those two areas. So encouraging parent input, 67.8% of our parents agree or strongly agree that we encourage parent input. 70% agree or strongly agree that we create parent involvement opportunities. 50.8% said agree or strongly agree that we provide parent education opportunities. So we know that's somewhere where we can grow. We can grow in all of these areas, obviously, and then 80% agreed or strongly agreed that we provide adequate communication. And you'll see in a later slide, I have some of our strengths and some of our areas to grow as we reflected on this. So here is the tool. Again, the same rating scale is used of the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the first part is looking at building relationships. So how have we progressed in developing the capacity of our staff, of our admin, of our teachers and classified staff to build trusting and respectful relationships with families? So we rated ourselves a 4. How we would rate our progress in creating welcoming environments for all families in the community. Looking at our Meet the Professor and some of our other activities, we rated ourselves a 5 there. Again, COVID notwithstanding, this is kind of overall. Rate the LEA's progress in supporting staff to learn about the family's strengths, languages, cultures. And then finally, looking at our progress in developing multiple opportunities for our families to engage in two-way communication with our educators and our school site leadership. We're also asked to reflect upon how we're building partnerships to help improve student outcomes. So we had to rate our progress in providing professional learning and support to teachers and principals to improve the school's capacity to partner with families. We feel that we're full implementation, but we still had a little area to grow there, as well as providing our families with information and resources to support their own student learning. And then also a 4 was our progress in supporting families to understand and exercise their legal rights and advocate for their own students and all students. And we find that that work happens often through school site council, through the DLAC meetings that we have. So that's where some of that information comes. And then we rated ourselves a 5 when we were looking at our progress in implementing policies or programs for teachers to meet with families and discuss progress and ways to work together. And those would be through our Meet Your Professor, through the conferences, and just everyday interactions. And then also we have to look at seeking input for decision making. And again, we're looking at our Honor Society, at our strategic planning committees, at all of our different committees and how we seek parent input, surveys, absolutely. So we rated ourselves a 5 in looking at the LEA's progress in building capacity for our principal, for our chancellor, and staff to engage families in advisory groups with decision making. Also, and so that was where we rated ourselves the highest, but we have 4s in the next 2, which is progress in building capacity and of supporting family members to engage in these advisory groups. We still think we could have broader participation. And then also providing families with opportunities to provide input on policies and programs, still some area of growth. And then finally, this one was initial implementation, although I think, excuse me, it had been higher in the past. Coming out of COVID, reading through everything, all of the comments in the LCAT parent surveys, I think this is somewhere where we needed to kind of take a step back to focus on again. which was providing opportunities to have families, teachers, principals, and district administrators all work together to plan, design, implement family engagement activities at the school and district. So really letting them tell us how we can further shape parent engagement. And so overall, and a lot of this came from the surveys, from the comments, our strengths seem to be strong communication. That was repeated over and over again, that our families were very pleased with the communication from the site and organization levels. There were quite a few comments saying that our board and our administrators and our staff care about students, and that's evident. A lot of people were focused on our strong honor societies at both of our sites. And then the next one about parent volunteer opportunities was kind of like a throwback. It was described as a strength pre-COVID. And so really want to keep that there, parent volunteer opportunities, and make sure that we are focusing on that again. And then also a lot of good feedback from our town halls. Some progress that we have made and our families have recognized is increasing our ELAC attendance. We are doing a better job of outreaching to different student groups during open enrollment. I have heard at the school site council about our schools are really looking to offer parent education opportunities, and you saw that was a little bit lower in the overall survey data chart that I had, and so that is an area where we're starting to take steps in that direction. And then also our families are seeing more communication from our teachers as well. Some focus areas that we have based on our reflection is we want to increase ways for meaningful participation, especially for some of our student groups of English learners, students from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds, or students with disabilities. We want to help seek input on our school goals and activities prior to communicating. And although communication was one of our strengths, a little focus area that I saw a few times was, can we make it more concise? And so that's something we may be looking at. Again, more parent education opportunities, looking at community outreach and involvement, bringing the whole community in, and then reviving parent involvement at our schools and our school community in the fall, coming back from COVID. I'm going to take a drink of water and pause before I go on to the next slide. Any questions?
Dr. Henry, I've uniformly heard, as in focus groups and so on, that last bullet in your focus area, there's a huge thirst for it. And honestly, as you said correctly, there is that was a strength. And I think it's a privilege for us to have parents say, hey, I want to be more involved. Mm-hmm. And I understand the COVID situation and so on. Just keep that in mind as you guys plan out the next year, in a safe manner. How can we get them more involved? Because it's a true privilege to have parents who say, look, I want to get more involved. So I think it's great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so by going through that reflection and coming up with focus areas, we have now met the standard for the local indicator of parent engagement. And so we're getting on there, but our next one, local indicator, is school climate. And that is aligned to our LCAT goal 3, which is a safe, secure, well-equipped learning environment for our students. And the measure for this one, the standard that we have to meet, is a little different because school climate really is also measured through the state measures of chronic absenteeism, suspension. They're also part of school climate. What the state wanted is for us to annually measure students' perceptions of school safety and school connectedness through an annual survey or other measures. So for this, we used our LCAP survey, and here are some of the overall findings as it relates to students' perception of school safety and their connectedness to our OPA schools. So for our LCAP student survey, we had 501 responses, And overall, our students are connected to OPA. They feel safe and supported at school. The survey showed they trust their teachers. They feel their teachers listen to them and encourage them to do their best. And students feel that they're being supported both academically and social emotionally as well. So here are some of the strengths when it came to this. I do have some areas of growth in the next slide, but 86% of our students agree that OPA provides a positive learning environment, agree or strongly agree. And I will tell you that there were also some that maybe put neither. So it was a pretty small ratio of students who did not agree for most of these. 88% of OPA students say they care about their school. Personally, as someone new coming in, reading that data point really spoke to my heart. Maybe I've been other places where kids maybe don't care as much about their school. So that really resonated with me personally. 90% of our students believe OPA is a safe place to go to school. 85% say they trust their teachers, they trust their school staff. 87% say their teachers listen to them. And 90% state that teachers and school staff encourage students to do their best. And then here are some areas of growth after reviewing the survey when it comes to school climate. So some areas of growth are providing students with opportunities to build character. That was actually, so 60% of our students stated that OPA has programs that build character. So that's that's a lower percentage than what we were seeing overall. And I was very impressed that we were catching that. We are addressing that though through PBIS. Also the development of the graduate profile, I think really does tie in to building character. And so, hopefully we'll have some higher results in that area next year. And then also, 64% stated that they are participating in interesting clubs and activities. I will say that could be due to COVID, that some of those activities and offerings were not offered last year, but that will also be a focus area this year as we're looking at what we offer our students and what we want for them to leave OPA with. And then finally-
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course. Yes, Dr. Smith.
I was just wondering, did you do any disaggregation of the data in that one? Especially, I'm thinking about equity, and if there were any trends in those who were dissatisfied with being in certain student population groups. I think that'd be really important to tease out or know.
I did not, because I was not here when the survey was given. However, I think that is a great suggestion and really a next step to this, especially when we're looking at our student groups. Are they all being offered and taking advantage of the same opportunities? And which actually ties right into this next local indicator, which is, do they all have access to a broad course of study? And I'm also going to include enrichment activities in that as well. So I think that's great. Yes.
And just
always disaggregating.
And just to kind of tag on to that, we do have that data, and actually some of the data, when you look at it, might be a little bit almost opposite of sometimes what we think. A lot of times our lower socioeconomic students, as well as our English learners, are actually rating us quite a bit higher in a lot of these areas, kind of feeling like maybe they are taking more advantage of some of these programs. And so we do have that data disaggregated and have kind of looked at some of those trends, and the fact that some of our student groups do actually rate us higher than the overall student population in a lot of these different areas.
And I'll be sure, Dr. Smith, to look at those reports to make sure that as we're moving forward, because again, it is a focus area, and really looking at our programs, that we take all of those factors into consideration. So thank you for that. And our last local indicator is broad course of study, and that ties to our LCAT goal number 1. and that we have to annually measure equity in our course access by tracking data, identifying barriers, and implementing improved practices. I will tell you, this is a little, this one is focused a little more on high school because in elementary and middle schools, most of our students receive the same broad course of study for the most part. So you won't see as much differentiation here as you may in other in high school, so to speak. So we have to look at how we're placing kids into courses, and we use a variety of assessments, as you know, data tools. We look at ARIES, iReady diagnostics, and other data sources, including teacher recommendation, to make sure that we differentiate the curriculum and instruction and that we meet the needs of our diverse student population. We also then have to look at differences across school sites or different student groups. And as I said, all of our students we are an inclusion school. Both of our schools work on the inclusion model. So you will see that all of our students are enrolled in math, ELA, the world languages, science. We have a STEAM lab that we're focusing on for next year. We do have electives for our middle school students. They can choose different ones, which include band, ASB, PAL, etc. And again, our full inclusion model assures that our students are supported in the classes that they choose. And then finally, when we looked at barriers, we don't have, being a elementary and middle school, we don't have true barriers to prevent access to a broad course of study. But what in our reflection, Dr. Kernan and I thought that maybe there's barriers if we have newer teachers that don't have as much experience with the multiple intelligences. And so maybe one of our barriers that we need to focus on is making sure that all of our staff, including our newer teachers, because we do have quite a few new hires over the last 2 years, are able to provide access to that course of study of the multiple intelligences, which is so central to our curriculum. And then finally, they asked, are there any revisions or new things that we're going to be doing to help assure a broad course of study? So we mentioned bringing on MTSS, our professional development on the multiple intelligences, and then also bringing in weekly STEAM classes and that STEAM elective that'll be available on a wheel for our students in grades 6 through 8. Whew, so that takes me to the end. Thank you very much. And do you have any additional questions for me?
I have a question, Dr. Henry. I was wondering about art. I noticed that that wasn't included in some of the listings that were there. I was particularly impressed with the Art Masters program at SOC. I had known about it all the years I'd been there, but I hadn't actually seen it in practice until last year. And so I just wanted to see if that was a consideration when you're looking at some of these broad studies.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. Do you want to answer that?
I can kind of jump in. So we are looking at bringing the return to the Art Masters program. We kind of had trying to figure out how to do it during COVID, but it definitely is a great program that we have at both of our sites. So our chancellors actually have been looking at getting the supplies and everything for the Art Masters program and all of the curriculum so that we can continue on with that art. So that would also be part, kind of as it was talked about earlier, in that focus on visual and performing arts. So it's not just the performing arts, but also making sure that we have a really comprehensive art program for both our elementary school kids, as well as that ability to take the art as an elective in middle school.
Thank you, because I think that also addresses multiple intelligences as well. Yep. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So moving on to the next is items for action. Item A, approve the 2021-20 through 2024 local control and accountability plans. Number 1 is OPA Saddleback Valley, and number 2 is OPA SOC. The LCAP is a 3-year plan that describes the goals, actions, services, and expenditures to support positive student outcomes that address state and local priorities. It is recommended that the Board of Directors approve action item A, 1 and 2. Can I get a motion?
I make a motion to approve action items A, 1 and 2.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All right, let's do, is there any discussion for this?
I think we presented this at the last meeting, so unless there's any questions, there haven't been any revisions since our presentation.
Wonderful. Shall we call a roll call then? All right, Miss Agarwala.
So sorry. It's okay. It's okay. It's Agarwal and I.
Mr. Kagu.
Aye.
Dr. Smith.
Aye.
And Travis is aye. All right, moving on to the next one. Action item B, approve the 2021-2022 school budget. Number 1, OPA Saddleback Valley, and number 2, OPA South Orange County. OPA is required by law to adopt a budget for the 2021 and 2022 fiscal year no later than June 30th, 2021. The final budget for the 2021 and 2022 are based upon revenue assumptions outlined within the governor's May revision, as well as the school-specific assumptions for revenue and expenditures, and will incorporate expenditures listed in the local control accountability plans, the LCAPs. It is recommended that the Board of Directors approve action item B, 1 and 2. Can I get a motion?
I make a motion.
Can I get a second?
I second.
All right, can I get a roll call?
Agarwal, I.
Thank you. Mr. Kagu? Dr. Smith?
Aye.
And Travis is aye. Did we need to present anything else on this, or is it good to move forward?
Yep, I think we presented it earlier when we were presenting the financials.
All right, thank you. Item C, approve board policy 6158, independent study. The board policy updates our current policy regarding independent study and aligns to the policy to the current OPA practices and the California Education Code. It is recommended that the Board of Directors approve action item C. Can I get a motion?
I make a motion to approve action item C.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Do we have anybody presenting on this?
This is really just aligning our independent study policy to our current virtual learning program and making sure that we're abiding by all of the Ed Code requirements.
Wonderful. Any discussion? No? Okay, let's go ahead and do a roll call. Agarwal.
Agarwal, I.
Mr.
Aye.
Dr. Smith?
Aye.
And Travis is aye as well. All right, action item D, approve board policy 1312.3, uniform compliance. The board policy updates our current policy regarding uniform compliant processes and aligns to the policy to the current OPA practices and state and federal law. It is recommended that the Board of Directors approve action item D. Can I get a motion?
I'll move to approve action item D.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Awesome. Any discussion?
So this again is just bringing our uniform complaint procedures up to date and making sure that we're compliant with Ed Code and the CCRs.
Wonderful.
Dr. Kernan, I gotta admit, I thought when I read, I thought this is about people complaining about uniforms, and then I realized no, it's to. So thank you.
It could be them complaining about uniforms, but that would not rise to the level of a uniform complaint. But that would, they could.
I have a quick question, actually. Sorry, this is broader regarding, I know this was brought up last meeting about this process of updating our policies. I suddenly remembered that in one of the board trainings I went to at the conference a few months ago, our legal counsel was doing a presentation, and they, offer services that, every few years boards utilize to go through all of their areas and make sure they're appropriately covered from a legal standpoint. I'm just wondering, do we do that as well, or is it all just relying on you, Dr. Kernan, to like make sure everything aligns?
So we do go through and we align it with our with the California School Boards Association, and we use their board policies that have been legally vetted. If there's a board policy that's specifically addressing something just for charter schools, then there wouldn't be those kind of boilerplate policies out there. And so then we go through our own legal counsel that does focus on charter schools. So so it kind of depends on what that board policy is. So for things like uniform complaint policies, that's a policy that all school districts have to have. And so the California School Boards Associations provides those policies that have already been legally vetted, and then you can sort of just update them with your school's name and any particulars that are immaterial for your own policies. So, but if it's like having to do with lottery or something like that, that wouldn't be from a public school, then we would use our legal counsel to create or vet those policies.
Okay, so it's only if it's charter specific or if there's not an existing template
policy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Is it possible though to have them take a look through just to make sure that we have everything? I mean, to me, it might be advantageous because I know you're doing this process, Amy, and I applaud you for it, but it might be helpful to have them help you with this to just make sure that we're not missing anything or, anything that, might need to be updated.
Yeah, and we can go through. Right now, we're trying to kind of get through all of those policies. And then once we kind of get through the ones that we know are legally mandated, then we can have them kind of go through and make sure that we're not missing anything.
Wonderful.
Yeah, if it's a reasonable cost, I agree, Delay. I wouldn't mind tapping them to do that for us. Because so many of these, do have a legal ramifications. So
yeah, so we can just make sure that kind of once we get through all the mandated ones that we're not missing anything that's mandated.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Are we ready to approve this? Shall we have a roll call?
Agarwal, aye. I'm just going to help out.
Thank you. You got to thank Mr. Jackson for not showing up tonight. Mr. Kagoo?
Aye.
Dr. Smith?
aye.
And Travis is aye. All right, moving on to action item E, approve board policy 5145.3, non-discrimination/harassment. The board policy updates our current policy regarding non-discrimination and harassment and aligns to the policy to the current OPA practices and state and federal laws. It is recommended that the board of directors approve action item E. Can I get a motion?
I make a motion to approve action item E.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
This is an item that we have to review each year to make sure that we are in compliance with our non-discrimination and harassment. And then this policy is posted on our website as well as throughout our school sites as part of making sure that we're compliant.
Wonderful. Can we go ahead and get a roll call then?
Agarwal, aye.
All right. Kagoo?
Aye.
Dr. Smith?
Aye.
Travis is aye as well. Moving on to action item F, approve board policy 5145.7, sexual harassment. The board policy updates our current policy regarding sexual harassment and aligns the policy to the current OPA practices and state and federal laws. It is recommended that the board of directors approve action item F. Can I get a motion?
I'll move to approve action item F.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Pretty much the same as the previous one.
All right. Let's go ahead and do a roll call.
Agarwal, aye.
Kangu?
Aye.
Dr. Smith?
Aye.
And Travis is aye as well. So moved. Action item G. Approve the 2021-2022 OPA Student Handbook. The Student Handbook has been updated to reflect current procedures and policy. It is recommended that the Board of Directors approve action item G. Can I get a motion?
I make a motion to approve action item G.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Is there discussion?
The handbook has to be updated every year. And this year, there really weren't very many updates except for the inclusion of some COVID-related policies and procedures, as well as some technology procedures related to now having all of our students be able to utilize OPA Chromebooks at home as well as at school. So other than that, it's pretty much the same handbook, just with all of our school rules and information in it.
I had a couple of questions about it. First off, I know at our last meeting, we had asked that when the student handbook came out this next year, that it would reference that all additional policies would be available on a website. I didn't see that in there. And I know that was something that we wanted to add to the student handbook. Can we go ahead and make sure that that's added?
Yes, I can add that. And I apologize for not having that in there.
And then the second thing is I was actually surprised that the mascot wasn't mentioned.
Because we were kind of waiting on, well, first the cover of each one of the school's planners is actually going to be the contest winners of the mascot drawing contest. Or actually, I think it's for SV. I think it's all of the mascot entries, and so we're kind of using it as kind of a way to kind of bring that out for the students by actually making it the cover of the student planner.
Okay. And then my last question is, as we've been approving all these policies, have they all been now updated in the handbook as well to match? Okay, that was just my last question. Any other questions regarding this? No. Okay. Seeing none, let's go ahead and move to a roll call.
Agarwal, aye.
All right, Kagu? Dr. Smith?
Aye.
And Travis is aye as well. Moving on to the next one, H. Approved purchase of the Study Sync ELA materials for OPA Saddleback Valley. OPA Saddleback Valley only purchased a 3-year adoption of the McGraw-Hill Study Sync middle school ELA materials during our initial ELA adoption period in 2018. The adoption ended on June 1st, 2021. In order to align OPA SV and OPA SOC ELA adoption for middle school ELA and ensure OPA SV students have ELA curriculum, staff proposes purchasing an additional 3-year adoption of McGraw-Hill Study Sync ELA materials for $40,046 plus any applicable sales tax. It is recommended that the Board of Directors approve action item H. Can I get a motion?
I make a motion to approve action item H.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion on this one?
It's pretty much just what it says. The cost will be expended over the 3-year period. So it's not all $40,000 just in this year's budget. It'll be spread out over the 3 years. And this allows us, instead of buying the materials year by year, to save quite a bit of money by just aligning our 2 adoptions and purchasing all 3 years of materials because we are going to continue to use those materials until that adoption is up.
Any other questions? Seeing none, let's move to roll call.
Agarwal, aye.
Kagu? Dr. Smith?
Aye.
And Travis is aye. So moved. Action item I, approve purchase of additional McGraw-Hill Wonders K through 5th ELA materials. OPA Saddleback Valley only purchased a 3-year adoption of McGraw-Hill Wonders ELA materials for several grades in 2018. In addition, both SOC and SB have an increased enrollment. Therefore, it is necessary to purchase additional ELA materials in order to ensure that all students adequate curriculum. Staff proposed purchasing a 5-year adoption for additional McGraw-Hill Wonders ELA curriculum for $68,194 plus any applicable tax. It is recommended that the Board of Directors approve action item I. Can I get a motion?
I make a motion to approve action item.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion? So similar to the previous board item, actually for our elementary, we have 5 years left on the adoption. In grades 3 and grades 5, SV did not actually adopt the curriculum. For some reason, they were buying it year by year back when they did it in early 2018. So again, to save us some money from having to repurchase it every year and bring the two adoptions into alignment, this will be spread out over the 5 years. So it impacts the budget over a 5-year period, but it will ensure that we have that adequate materials and save us some money by purchasing the 5-year adoption versus year over year. Any questions?
Dr. Kernan, can I just ask, related to this and the last item, I assume with the way it's written and what you just said, the totals that we see are for the full multi-year, right? But I don't know that everyone always might assume the right thing. They could assume also it's that per year. So if we could always specify that to either put a total of or per year, just to say that and be very clear in the items, I think that would really help when we're reading these on our own.
Okay, I can add that in.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, let's move to roll call.
Agarwal, aye.
Kagu? Dr. Smith?
Aye.
And Travis is aye as well. Moving on to item J. Approve the 2021 through 2023 OPA salary schedule. Staff has revised the OPA salary schedule to reflect newly created positions and to change some previous position. It is recommended that the Board of Directors approve action item J. Can I get a motion?
I make a motion to approve action item J.
Can I get a second? Oh, Paul, okay. Is there?
I have a quick presentation to share.
Okay.
If that's all right.
Perfect.
Do you want me to run it?
Want me to try to share my screen?
If you want, I can run it.
Okay, thank you. So to illuminate this for everyone, periodically throughout the school calendar year, we do bring to the board and adjust proposals for approvals for the salary schedule based on the needs and requirements. We'll go to the next slide. Just to remind everyone, the salary schedule sets pay levels for government and school employees. Changes that are made are based on organizational requirements and needs. And those, again, as I mentioned, change periodically. And then a number of changes at the same time are brought for consideration. So we kind of save them until there's a grouping and then do it that way rather than every, too often, I guess I'd say. All right, next slide then. So for this one that was in your board materials packet, in the administrative tab on the salary schedule, we have these two positions that are adds. And then on the next slide, we have the classified changes, a lot of removals for positions that were not hired, that we anticipated hiring prior to COVID, okay? So we removed several of these and then re-looked at everything. So then you can see that we changed the custodian schedule from salary to hourly, instructional aid, remove and change to a progression of instructional aid 1 and 2, executive assistant. Some of the recent positions that the board has approved are also listed here. Next slide. For certificated, no changes to the certificated schedule from the January 23rd, 20 board approved salary schedule. And maybe we can just show the salary schedule for everybody now, just to have a quick look.
Let me pull it up real quick.
Specifically on the certificated. What I wanted to share there is...
And then I gotta jump between screens real quick.
Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Kernan.
There it is.
I could try. I've got it here too.
Got it.
Okay. And this will be posted, the salary schedule will be posted on the website. So everyone will have access to it at any given time. And it's updated. We'll fill in the board approved at the very bottom left. So we'll have the current date, okay, assuming the board approves. And the changes, you know, are evident, obviously, minimal, but we'll look at the next slide.
So on here, you have
I can talk about this
services and the director of student services were both added to the administrator salary schedule.
We added to the steps on the administrator salary schedule as well. On this one, the certificated, I want to highlight that you know, we do promote additional education, right? So, you know, master's degrees, advanced learning, those accomplishments. So what we have is master's or bachelor's plus 60. If we look at class E on the right side, we have that listed. And then also in class F, we have the bachelor's plus 75 credits or the doctorate. So we're actually really pleased with the numbers of our certificated staff who have their master's degrees or are working toward those. It's really excellent. And it's something that we promote, we support, and it really gives us a competitive advantage, I think. So, and the next slide, that's the classified one that we discussed a minute ago. So you can see those changes that I highlighted are listed here as well.
So major changes, just the executive assistant being added, the instructional assistant 1 and 2, and the instructional assistant 2, just to refresh everyone's memory, we went over the job description the last board meeting, but the difference between the instructional assistant 1 and 2 is really that the instructional assistant 2 has some more duties before and after school. So that is a full-time position that would receive benefits versus our instructional assistant 1, which is a part-time assistant. So that's really you'll notice that the salaries are the same. So the difference really has to do more with the job description, the duties, and then that full-time versus part-time.
And we will be interviewing Dr. Kernan, just to share, for those really quite soon, okay? So.
Yeah, I think those are next on the list, and we just interviewed for instructional assistant PE today, I think.
Today we did, that's right.
So lots of interviews going on.
We had 2 great candidates today. That's all I have then. Any questions from board members?
I have a couple.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Agarwal.
Paul, you might cover my questions. I just wanted to know if you could please explain the BA plus 45, BA plus 60, BA plus 70. What does that mean? And how does that relate?
So that is a bachelor's degree, BA, you know, acronyms, right? Plus an additional 45 credits, right? Plus an additional 60 credits, plus an additional 75 credits. So, you know, and it says, or a master's or a doctorate. So we want to, a lot of times there'll be certifications that teachers will work on for specialists, reading specialists, or what's the other one? Glad.
And talented or glad with
yes,
being
right.
learners. So there's different things that that staff can do to earn those credits. They do have to be graduate level coursework credits in order to qualify for those additional units, and they do have to pertain to a person's, their job
related courses.
It can't just kind of be random things. So those would be approved credits that people could use for step advancement or column advancement on the salary.
So we want to reward that additional effort and results that our staff are taking on to help our school, to help OPA.
And then those who have a master's degree or a doctorate degree above what is necessary for those columns would receive an additional stipend in recognition of the fact that they have earned a degree with those credits.
Right.
So we had a version, there's some different versions. So this is the final version. This is what we're voting on, is this version that we're seeing right now.
This is what you're voting on tonight.
This incorporates everything and sets the bar for the future. Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Kaku, did you have an additional question?
Yes. When are we going to have somebody else running the Zoom so Dr. Kernan can focus on?
And I was all prepared to do my part tonight, but anyway, thank you, Dr. Kernan.
No, I was going to, I actually.
But we are hiring
our executive.
That was more my question. When are we going to get?
He starts on the 5th, if I'm not, on the 1st, July 1st.
July 1st.
Yes.
So the July 15th board meeting, I will not have to run the Zoom.
How about that? Good question.
I will see it when I will believe it when I see it.
Very good.
I will be transitioning the Zoom. All right, I'll put it that way. I won't say that I won't entirely touch it, but I will be transitioning the Zoom over to someone else.
That'll be a special moment. Any other questions then?
I actually have one more question. Are you hiring those occupation or those
instructional assistants
you took out? You removed director of technology, you removed all those. Are those those are gone forever, or are they're
gone?
Those are gone. We've shuffled it around. We've kind of right-sized and hired positions that we think, or created positions that we think better meet the needs of the organization now. So some of those were leftover positions from a long time ago.
Yes.
That we just had never filled because they really weren't positions that worked for our organization. And so now that we have kind of figured out what positions we think are going to work for us, we removed some of those that really haven't been filled since I've been here or even know about.
To add to that, Ms. Agarwal, sometimes we have an idea on the level of a position, and then we look at the skills of others on the staff, right, when we bring in additional talent, and then we realize we need to adjust that level. So we will have had a position that might be director of technology, but we really don't need that. And then we made a different hiring decision at a different level to support in a different way. That's an example.
Thank you.
And then I had two questions. First is these numbers are all base salary. This is not including benefits, correct?
Correct.
Everyone gets $11,000, and it's actually on the salary schedule, the allowance that we give to each employee.
Wonderful. And then is there a way at a future board meeting that we can really look at a comparison of kind of how are we doing versus our neighboring schools? And because I always actually find that extremely helpful as we assess, are we paying our teachers and staff and admins enough? Are we competitive? I think that would be helpful, especially as we continue to assess this, because we want to make sure that, we're taking care of everyone so they do a great job for the kiddos.
We can definitely do that.
Yeah, we can definitely do it. Generally, I know, based on all the work that Dr. Kernan and I have done on this over the past years, that we're in that kind of target, that top quartile, right? But we'll put together the study at a future board member to just update and show that.
And anytime we make a new position, we always do a salary comparison to all of our kind of surrounding districts, as well as other charter schools of similar size, and even other kind of positions in different schools. So we always try to kind of make sure that we're sort of at the, you know, upper mid-range for that, at least upper mid-range for any of those salaries, so we can really get the most highly qualified candidates.
And then all like the teachers that are paid for the summer school stuff, or is that also on the same salary schedule, or is that like handled separately?
They are getting paid based off of their 2020-21 salaries. We basically took their annual salary and we figured out what their hourly rate is based on their normal annual salary, and then multiplied that by the 5 days a week and then the number of days that we're working, so that it took into account you know, where they are on the stepping column and what their normal salary is.
Wonderful. Dr. Smith, did you have any questions?
Of course. I also have 2 questions, but really quick. One was just a follow-up on Member Agarwal's process question about the positions that were removed. Mm-hmm. So if they're removed, if for years down the road, one is wanting to be brought back, just like any other position, it would come through board for approval?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And
yes.
we do a new salary comparison because that sometimes things change. We'd also update, if we were to bring one back, we'd also make sure and update the job description. So it would be almost like adding a new position, but we might utilize the same old job description and just update it.
Thanks. I just want to make sure I understood process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then the other question was, I don't have any issue with it. I'm just totally curious. For the years of service payments, I saw they're like at 13 years and 18 years. Like how is that decided? Because usually I would see something like at maybe 10, 15.
That's a standard, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, and we kind of, again, looked at a lot of our, our surrounding schools and districts, and because our salary schedule actually goes, you know, kind of up to 10, and then it goes, you know, it goes in those 5-year increments. Yeah. Then the in-between is when you sort of get that longevity. So, so since you get a step bump for the 5 years, then that 13 and 18, you can get a longevity. So you're not going an entire 5 years when you get up there in time, between when you get any type of movement. So that's usually why districts kind of put it on those years, because then it provides something in between those big jumps and stuff.
Yeah. So that's comparable, and it's paid as a lump sum.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks.
People don't want to wait 5 years to get any kind of increase.
These were great questions. Thank you, everybody.
Any other questions? Seeing none, let's move to roll call. Agarwal.
Yay.
I'll get it.
Yes. Approve. Aye for the one that was presented tonight. Thank you.
Kagoo?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
And Travis is aye. Moving on to action item K, approve the 2021-2022 stipend schedule. The stipend schedule for extracurricular activities has been updated to reflect current enrichment offerings. It is recommended that the Board of Directors approve action item K. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I have a question. I'm looking at the spreadsheet, and does the stipend, is that like an annual stipend, a monthly stipend, or an event-based stipend? What is it?
It's an annual stipend that's paid actually in June of each year. And then we ask the board annually to approve, which is what this is, the next year's set of stipends. It's based on work that employees have already done.
And Mr. Bali, does this mean that we do have, like, you know, is it a football coach if we have a football program, or do we have a football? For example,
these are the actual ones. We worked with the site leaders, administration, to determine altogether what would be the plan going forward, activities. Okay, so these are different than the ones from last year and the year previous, because they get changed in you know, kind of each year.
And these are kind of what we're looking at as of right now. So if there's, say a bunch of interest, one of the programs that we used to have is cheerleading. We didn't have any cheerleading coaches for the last couple of years. And so if we had staff members that were interested and students that were interested in participating, then we would bring that back as a revision to the stipend schedule. So this is kind of where we are now and looking at what programs we normally have and those programs that as of now we would be able to staff into those stipends. But if there was interest and additional programs, then we could bring that back for a revision and a future board meeting.
Yeah, I would love to make sure that this makes its way somehow to any of our comms to the parents, because I heard some feedback over the weekend that they would love to have more sports programs in the school. And me being new to the school, I didn't realize we had all of these different options. Mm-hmm. So if you can reiterate that next year, it's going to be hopefully we've seen the back of COVID and we're starting to reintroduce some of these sports programs. I would love to see that, but thank you.
Yeah, definitely. We're hoping to have definitely all of the ones that are on this list available next year.
I have a question about stipends as well. How do we rate in stipends compared to our neighbors?
We're not, so if you're looking kind of to compare us with like a high school district, they have much higher coaching salaries and stipends normally than we would have because our programs are much smaller. We actually have a lot more like sports programs than a lot of our surrounding district schools, because most of our district schools don't have middle school or elementary sports programs. So in some ways it's kind of hard to compare because a lot of our schools don't offer these same types of enrichment activities. But if you were to kind of compare the general stipends that people would receive, a lot of them are pretty similar. It's just, like I said, some of them are hard to compare because most of our surrounding schools don't have, flag football offered as an actual kind of school sport or volleyball or things in middle and elementary school. Those are normally just for high school.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought that we would have, because I was thinking it would be nice if we didn't have enough players or whatever, that we can combine the two schools in order to have a team that we could compete, with. But
a lot of them have gotten, most of the elementary and middle schools have sort of gotten away, and they'll just do intramurals like at lunchtime, or they'll do things that, like have just clubs that aren't associated with the schools. So we've actually looked at competing against some of our other charter schools in the area as well. If they can put together a team just so that we get our kids a little bit more playing time. So we've also looked into that.
And then the other question is if we don't have anybody who's willing to do cheerleading or et cetera, do we have to keep it within teachers that are at OPA? Can we outsource that and bring in a coach just for cheer or just for whatever we're missing?
Sometimes we have to make sure that we're meeting all of the insurance requirements. And a lot of times those coaches will, charge us quite a bit more than just paying a stipend to our teachers, because most of our teachers are really getting the stipend, but they're doing most of it, right after school. And so this is just kind of for their extra duties that they're doing outside of their normal workday. So a lot of times to try to hire a cheerleading coach, it would cost us a pretty large amount of money. We have looked at doing things, like having drama after school or things like that, and covering those expenses, or like the taekwondo or chess club or things like that. So we try to do it and make it as cost effective as possible, but hiring full coaches outside can usually get pretty expensive.
May I add one item? So when we interview certificate teachers, one of the conversation pieces that comes up is, what do they like to do? How do they like to support, coach? We had our 2 PE aides today. Of course, we were talking about what they might like to coach, right? So we get a sense of the interests of our employees in this way. And that helps us to figure out how we can support the activities that the students and parents would like.
We really have great teachers as well. And so a lot of times if there's something that the kids really want to do, they'll be able to find a teacher that will kind of help them out and, and sponsor their club or sponsor their activity. So we usually don't have a huge issue if it's something that the kids really want to do and it's something that's popular. But sometimes in different years, different things become popular and unpopular, depending on what group of kids and what they're interested in. So sometimes it's not always just about whether we have staff to fill those positions, but sometimes it's about whether we also have student interest in those different things to fill those positions as well.
Case in point, all the esports that we see there that we didn't see 2 years ago, right?
And it's like overflowing with interest.
So I'm sure Chancellor Alvarado and Chancellor Bridges would not be averse to having a inter-campus competition. So I think we should consider that could be a really cool enrichment, that even though other charter schools or other elementary schools are not offering, the fact that we have 2 campuses actually might be interesting, where if there's a meaningful teams on both campuses, I'm sure they'd be willing to fight for bragging rights. So I would encourage us to consider that. And the other one is...
we actually do that every year. We have a competition in each one of these sports between each one of the schools, and it's super fun. The staff comes out and everybody cheers, and it's a big event that we have for these sports.
We will invite all the board members.
Yep.
We'll invite all the board members to attend the competition.
You have to wear your orange or pink, and we'll see who supports you.
I think that another way to ask the question that Janelle asked is, if some of these, I would love for you guys to monitor if $250 is the right number. It's $5,000 if I add this up, and if you're looking for ways to invest the money that we have in the bank, this might be another place where this actually adds a lot of value. It adds a lot of school spirit. The parents get involved, and it just, I think it's really cool to see, so I think, I suspect that when we do the strategy, this is going to come out as enrichment activity needs to be amped up more, and maybe one lever there is maybe bump up the stipend to encourage people to participate more. So something for us to consider.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to piggyback on that. I'd like to see if that was a possibility for us as well.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I was kind of surprised that some were $250 and some were $500, and I take that's probably set up by the hours associated with it. But to me, I mean, these are all enhancements that we're doing at OPA, and it just makes our kids better. So if there's ways we can afford even more for this to give them the better experience, I think it would be great. My only other question is I noticed a lot of the clubs that are done aren't actually on here. And so are those done voluntarily by the staff then?
So the way that it works out, most of our clubs and extra kind of enrichment activities fall within everybody's normal workday. And so as part of their, regular duties, staff members need to support some type of club or enrichment activity. So the ones that take a lot of extra time or time that's outside of their normal workday, because like marching band, where they're doing, marching band parades on the weekends, or, football practice or something that's going longer past that normal workday, or teachers who are doing the gate coordinator, where they're having to work extra hours to coordinate gate testing and things like that. Those are the ones that are actually on this stipend schedule. Because if it's just part of their normal duties that falls within their normal our staff's normal workday, then it's kind of considered double dipping to be paying them twice for the same work hours. And so we look at the number of hours that it takes for each one of these things that would be beyond their normal workday.
Thank you. I think that the big takeaway I have is that if we can find, if there's more money to be more competitive, to offer more for this, I think that would be great to know. I mean, I'm okay approving this tonight, but I'd also love to see if we could do more for this. Dr. Smith, did you have anything to add?
I think I'm good. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. Thank you.
Awesome. Seeing none, let's move to roll call.
Agarwal, aye.
All right, Kagoo? Dr. Smith?
Aye. And
Travis is aye as well. All right. Item L, approve proposal for lease of the central office space. Now that central office employees are returning to in-person activities, and because OPA has added several additional central office staff and independent study teachers, it has been determined that a central office location is necessary. OPA is proposing a 3-year lease of 3,175 square feet office space at 18 Columbia, Aliso Viejo, California for full service gross monthly rent not to exceed $5,600. This office space will house central office staff and several independent study teachers. It is recommended that the board approve action item L. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I second.
Perfect. Any discussion on this?
So I just wanted to briefly, we've been looking at a variety of different office spaces and trying to find one that really meets our needs. Previously, before COVID, we were just renting some individual offices and cubicles at our 9870 Research Drive in a building there. And we thought that it was going to be much more conducive to our needs to have our own office space where we can do trainings, also house our IS teachers because we are running out of room on our school sites. And so being able to actually have our IS teachers off-site and not taking up an entire classroom would help out as well. And just looking to try to make sure that it is within our authorizers' boundaries, because then that frees us up to do a lot of different things at that site. And in looking, I think David and I probably looked at about 20 different properties, and we found this one. We were really lucky. It is much lower cost than most of the other properties that we were looking at. It's a large space. It meets all of our needs for offices and open areas and a place for our independent study teachers. It's on the first floor, so it's ADA compliant. And so we are waiting to receive the final lease, but we do have the proposal. And so we are hoping that you will approve. We added a little bit of a cushion with the 5,600. Our actual proposal comes to 5,398 per month. But because we haven't seen the final lease and we wanted to kind of, to your point earlier, Ms. Travis, we wanted to make sure that we had a little bit of a cushion for any kind of, moving in expenses or expenses that we might occur in that initial phase. We're asking that you just approve it for up to $5,600 a month. But like I said, our current proposal is for $5,398 a month, which comes out to about $1.70 per square foot, which is a very low cost. Most of the other ones we were looking at were between about $2.30 and even $2.50 a square foot. So, so we think that this is going to be a really good property that will that'll meet our needs and provide us with the space for us to be able to have all of those programs.
So, Dr. Kannan, I have some questions. I know it's past 9, but now, number one, this in the lease or the proposed counter proposal to lease, it says you cannot use it for school functions like teaching, classrooms, or students gathering. So when you have your IS teachers in, and when they are doing Zoom sessions, would you violate the usage?
We
actually already updated. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
okay, he'll be updated. Okay, thank you.
So in the actual lease agreement, we will be able to have those types of functions.
Good.
Mainly, they just didn't want us to have a classroom of 35 first graders running around in the building, but we made sure that was clarified.
That makes sense. And then the second question I have is, we're not going to have board meetings there. This is too small to have board meetings there, I assume, correct?
We actually,
so this is pure.
We actually do have a space, and that was one of our considerations in making sure that it was in Capo's boundaries, was that if we needed to have board meetings there, that was the option. And we do have a room there that we're using for trainings and that we can use for teacher trainings that actually is large enough that we could hold board meetings there.
So it could be used for workshops, board workshops, kind of thing as well.
Yeah, the only thing is that I was thinking, I don't know how, I've never been to an in-person board meeting except for the board retreat. So I don't know if the public come and we need to have space for them, but we can deal with that. It did say parking only 12, but I assume that there's open parking, right? I mean, like, I don't have to park on this side of the freeway.
Yeah.
And,
okay.
That's
I thought that was very funny. Orange County.
Only 1,000 square foot almost space that would be able to house even the audience for a board member.
Cool.
For a board meeting.
Okay. And I think the last question I have is, most of our work happens after 6 p.m. on Monday and Friday, particularly during board meetings. So you guys are cool with them shutting off the AC unless we pay them, right? You guys are cool with that, I assume.
Yeah, because most of our work is in our happens Monday through Fridays.
In our discussion with them, they did say that there are provisions, right, for weekend work, Saturday work, evening, that kind of thing. So we'll make sure
just make sure you at least have a fan when we have board
final lease
there,
to make sure that it's, you know.
Want to be a little roasty?
Thank you.
I have a question about IS again. So are we having students go there as opposed to the school sites if there's, okay, so can you clarify that piece for me?
So our IS teachers will be teaching virtually. And so the students won't actually be going there for IS. If the students are participating, say in the after school enrichment activities or things like that, then they'll be going to the school sites and and if there's any meetings that the IS teachers need to actually have with a student, then those will actually be at the school sites. But for them to do their synchronous instruction online, that kind of requires some quiet and a little bit of space, they'll have areas within the central office where they can do that.
Thank you.
How many staff will be located in this building, including the independent study?
So as of right now, we have 12. So it would be the 8 central office staff, and then as of right now, 4 independent study teachers.
But there's a little bit of room to grow if needed.
And I know this is a 3-year lease that you're recommending. Is there any hesitation about extending it out for that long? I understand there's a benefit because of reduced on the square footage pricing, but at the same time, a year ago or 2 years ago, we weren't sure if we even needed a central office. So, I mean, to me, I don't know if doing 3 years is the best to look at. Can you explain the thought process for that?
I think I can start and then Mr. Barley can kind of follow up. I think in the time that we have been out for COVID, so now not really having an office space. Before this, we did have an office space. It was just, we had offices and cubicles within another office setting. But over this time, and now with the additional staff that we've brought in, we really have seen the need to make sure that we always do have a place for our central office staff and not having them either have to work at home or going in and trying to find places on the school sites. We've had a lot of challenges with finding areas for everyone to work on our school sites because we use our school sites for for instruction and making sure that we're utilizing every available space for students and providing services directly to students. So I think that there likely isn't going to be a time in the future. I think when it was down to really just kind of 3 of us working in the central office, it was a little more feasible to just have us kind of bouncing around on the school sites or having just those 3 offices. But I think in light of where we are now, I don't think that there is going to be a time where we're going to be able to go back to not having any central office space. And we want to be able to do trainings, you know, and kind of bring teachers from both of our sites together and have a place to do that, even if it's during school and we're bringing, you know, a few teachers together to do professional development. We want to be able to have that flexibility for us to be able to work together as a central admin team, but also to have some place where we can bring together different people from our school sites and have an environment where we're not interrupting classes or taking away from places for direct services to students.
I just say objectively, it's been challenging. Everyone's been borrowing offices and is a great team, you know, teamwork to do that. But with the addition of staff and of course, be competitive hiring staff, you know, we need to have a place, I think, at this point. So I'm on board with that.
I feel bad kicking Chancellor Alvarado and Chancellor Bridges and everybody else out of their office.
Everybody, yeah.
2 or 3 times per week because we have phone calls or meetings or things to do.
The need for collaboration too, I think there'll be clear benefits from that, you know, being in the same place physically when we're allowed to do that. And then finally with the lease term, the 1-year leases, as we were going through this with several different places, 1-year leases are quite expensive. Most want 5-year. So 5-year is something that some were pushing for, and we settled on 3 as a good compromise and reasonable risk for OPA at this part of its evolution, we think.
And then one of my other questions is you had said that it was going to be, you know, probably under $5,600 a month, but that's just your rent cost. What's your total on soft cost?
So that includes, that actual cost is and I learned these terms, so that's our full gross. So it has all of those extra pieces in there. We are going to have to do our own phones and internet. And so David, I'll toss it over to you to kind of add that in. And then the only thing that's not covered is with custodial. And we're looking at utilizing kind of our custodians from the sites. And we were already planning on expanding to 1 extra custodian to cover some extra things at the sites now that we're going back on campus. And so having that custodian, you know, kind of alternate between the 2 sites 4 days a week, and then do the central office won't take very long, but kind of on that 5th day. So that won't really be much of an extra cost. So it's really just the phones and internet that isn't covered in this, and David's been working on it. So
yeah, so the phones, you know, all the pieces, the internet, we have it all lined up pending this, ready for July implementation. Dr. Gnan talked about custodial. The only other thing is furniture.
The phones we're looking at redoing for
all sites.
So all 3 sites. So it would just be a small additional cost to what we're doing at the school sites already for upgrading our phone systems.
So the phones, we've had issues at the school sites with intercom, with, you know, equipment. So we're really moving to a VoIP system is what we're planning, which will work much better for everyone, and right sizing it, the costs are good. You know, so we're excited about that for all the sites and doing that this summer. The other thing I'd add is furniture. We have furniture in storage that's been in storage from previous administration offices for OPA. We saved the good furniture.
Rid of the white leather. But
yes, we saved the good furniture. It's been in some of those containers that you all see on the campuses. That's where it's been living for a few years now. And then we have, we think, a generous donor that's going to also be moving out of their space, and we may get some of their nice furniture also. So that would be nice.
So we really think that probably that 5,600 should be able to cover most of those costs completely.
Thank you. Dr. Smith, did you have any questions?
Yeah, just one. Well, I want to say I appreciate, it seems like you've really done your due diligence. So thank you. I just was wondering about possibly amending what we approve, just because I like to err on the side of caution. And this is us approving a proposal to go sign a lease that we don't get to like approve the actual legally reviewed lease before it's signed. So can we amend to say like the 3-year not to exceed the 5,600 and contingent upon legal counsel approval and review?
Yeah.
Or something like that. I don't know the best way to say it, but do you get my point?
I do. I want to add something else, kind of safeguards for you all to consider when someone makes the motion. Not only is the broker have a legal team, okay, who's going to be reviewing it, but that's kind of the fox watching the hen house. We want OPA, and we've identified someone who's a real estate attorney to look at our best interest, to look at the lease. So that's already arranged. The other thing too, the cushion that the board decides, I always like to err on the side of having, there can be something unexpected with moving costs or something that may show up in the lease that we're not contemplating right now. So I would even say if you make it a little bit more than, I think it's about $200 more, but still reasonable, it just might be on the safe side, to take it to 6,000, but we fully expect that it would be less per month. Just my 2 cents to consider as you make a motion.
So is someone going to make a motion?
Actually, Mr. Travis, I have one more. I think logistically, Mr. Bali and I had this discussion where should the office be in one of the campuses or not? And I think we've discussed this, and it makes sense why we shouldn't pick one campus over the other. But you guys have worked it out with, the site administrator, the 2 chancellors, to say, look, how are we going to make this happen? Where we got one in Lake Forest, one in Mission Vale, and the offices in Elizabeth. You guys have sorted out the logistics, and you feel this is the right location to have it. I mean, just at first blush, I would have said, look, why don't we have this close to one of the schools so you cut off commute time for some of you guys? But I assume you guys have worked through that, and that those considerations are in already, right?
We've actually driven from space to the schools and back and forth. So we made our one of our considerations was to make sure that it was 10 to 15 minutes from each school, and it is.
And we did look at a couple of
we also looked at
that were closer, and those sites really didn't meet our needs. One of them was not ADA compliant. It didn't have an elevator, and it was on the 2nd floor.
Yeah.
And so then we kind of looked at a bunch of different sites and trying to get them, as close as possible, but still being able to meet all of those requirements that we had as well.
Additionally, we looked at the commutes of our current employees would be, working primarily, at the administration office, and really took that into consideration. The routes to get there was very important to us. And we talked to the employees about it, to be honest.
Yeah. And we had in the past looked at possibly having it on one of our sites, but it's really not viable with the space issues that we have on our sites. We would have to take over multiple classrooms, and that would actually decrease our ADA and revenue and ability to continue having some of the programs that we have. So that really, we wanted to make sure that we weren't impacting the school sites with adding this there. As well as just, continuing to impact them by taking over their offices and other spaces on the sites.
Any other questions or discussion?
And then did we want to amend the motion to be a 3-year not to exceed, and then I'm not sure what the board wanted to put as that not to exceed amount, and then pending legal approval of the lease.
Who would like to make that motion?
Well, before the motion's made, I need to have any more discussion about, like, I'm okay to say the not to exceed 6,000 and make that motion, but I don't want to throw out the motion if we need to discuss that a little bit more and what David proposed, or Mr. Barley, sorry.
Is everyone okay with upping that to be 6,000, knowing that we are, the proposal that we have now is for about 54, and we'll definitely are hoping to stay right there, but just in case there's any additional costs.
I'm fine with it. I understand the need for a central office, and we do have such tight quarters as exists at our school. So, or at SOC is what I can speak to. So I support that not to exceed 6,000.
And usually, as you all know, with leases, there's a deposit required up front. I expect that to show up as well. Okay. Perhaps first, last, that kind of thing.
And I also did a quick rough math, and it looks like this is about 0.5% of our both campuses budget, what we're going to spend annually on this. So seems to be okay and reasonable. So yeah, I'm okay with going to 6,000, not to exceed, but obviously we want to keep it as close to 5,300 as possible, right? But yeah.
Yeah, I'm thrifty. I don't want to really go any above that at all. And I want to get some free rent.
Remember, this is all public, so your landlord might be watching this already. So
I don't want to go anywhere above that.
I'm fine with it as well. I just think one benefit that's happened in the last 2 years is that admin has been able to be more present on the school sites. So I do hope that there's a plan for that to continue, because I do think that involvement is made the schools better. So I just hope there's a plan for that. But I understand the need for the space. And I agree, I'm with Paul, try to keep it at 5,300, but if we have to go up higher, then you have my support to do so.
And we definitely, just like we have for the last 3 years, we want to make sure that everyone is still visiting the sites. And it's something that is a huge, a huge priority of mine. And I know that Dr. Henry and I have talked about it, making sure that that her and I are doing walkthroughs on, or kind of continuing to do walkthroughs on the sites. We actually even do our final interviews for all of our higher level positions as walkthroughs on the site, to make sure that we are setting that priority even for anyone who is coming to work for us, that they know that it is a priority that everyone be visible and out on the sites frequently, and getting to know the students and staff and families, and everything that's going on. So even though we have this space, it's that tone is set, and Dr. Henry can attest, because she did her final interview as a walkthrough SV. that tone is set right even before everybody's hired.
Wonderful.
So are we ready? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So I'll do the motion to approve amending not to exceed to 6,000, and then pending legal review of the actual lease.
Can I get a second?
I second it.
All right, roll call.
You want to try it? I'm just gonna go. Agarwal, aye.
I'm struggling so much with that tonight. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Kagoo. Smith, Dr. Smith?
Aye.
And Travis is aye. Moving on to next agenda item, community input for non-agendized items. The public may comment on items not listed on the agenda that are within the legal purview of the board of directors. Do we have any community input on non-agendized items?
We do not.
Seeing none, we will move to the last item on the agenda, which is adjournment. It is recommended that the board adjourn the regular meeting of the Oxford Preparatory Academy Board of Directors on June 24th, 2021. Can I get a motion?
No competition from Delight. So
I know, I can't do it when I'm running the meeting.
I make a motion to adjourn the board meeting today.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Wonderful. Roll call.
Agarwal, aye.
All right. Kagu? Smith?
Aye.
And I as well. And I'm definitely going to talk to Mr. Jackson about not coming or showing up next time. The meeting is adjourned at 9:33 p.m.
You did great, Ms. Travis.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Have a good